Good evening. Welcome to the MyCP webinar series. Paul Gross, your host. Really interesting change of meeting style tonight. I'm really looking forward to this, where I hope to share with you sort of an insider's view of the CP Research Network annual investigators meeting. So this shot here is of the 50 or so people that gathered in Delaware in the first week of May. So let me take you through what we're going to do. So what I'm going to do, rather than show our agenda, this is actually the agenda of what was planned for the day. So we started out with a welcome and then went through meeting goals. And I'm actually going to do a little bit of this so you get the feeling of it. And then we spend 45 minutes doing an icebreaker where everyone goes around and tells their name, their role in the meeting, or what they do either professionally or personally, why they're there. And then they tell a brief story about something that not even their closest colleagues would know about themselves. And it's really marvelous. It always runs long, but it's really a valuable way for everyone to learn a little bit about one another. And then I'm going to take you through a little bit of what I talked about in terms of our strategic objectives. And Kristie, who is our scientific director, Kristie Bjornson, is going to take us through a little bit of her presentation, but also what was the rest of the meeting. And then we had a keynote from our new Data Coordinating Center PI, Dr. Stephen Wisnaski, who's really just incredibly accomplished PhD researcher, clinical researcher. And then we had also a talk on trial validity by a representative from the National Institutes of Health. And then we went into breakouts. And as I said, Kristie will give you a sense of those. So our hosts were Dr. Rob Akins, who's a bench scientist, and Dr. Wade Schrader at Nemours. And Dr. Schrader has the additional perspective of he is the father of 2 adult children with CP. He had triplets. He has 4 kids, and of the triplets, 2 of them ended up with CP. And they were really very gracious hosts. We were also very lucky to have a number of sponsors in addition to Nemours, the Cerebral Palsy Alliance Research Foundation, the CP Foundation, and UCP all sponsored and all came to the meeting. And we really started this last year, and this really gave us quite a bit more of a well-rounded meeting with a lot of different perspectives represented. And it also makes the meeting possible by their financial support. So the objectives of the meeting are really to advance our strategy. And so in particular, we've got 4 elements to our strategy, 4 strategic objectives with a lot of sub-bullets. But really to advance the research portion of our strategy is the key thing that we set out to do there. And so because of where we are in our 5-year plan, and by the way, it's available on the About Us page on our website. If you haven't seen it, you're welcome to download it. We try to be very transparent. But because of where we are and things in that plan, we really focused on bolstering the registry as a core part of what we were doing. And it really informs the vision for how we see improving care and outcomes. And so we spent much of the first, the general sessions much of it was spent on that. And then we actually had breakout sessions aimed at gathering feedback on our operations, on how we grow and mature as a network. We'll talk a little bit about that. And then it's a very good sort of networking and professional development opportunity. So you've all seen this before. I share this, but I'm going to share it with a little different information, which talking about how I think about mission. Some people use mission and vision substituted in different ways. So I think of mission as purpose, like the 100-year reason for the organization being here. And it's really optimizing the lifelong health and wellness of people with cerebral palsy and their families. The gray portion is in our mission, but it's really the tactics by which we see that we're doing this, at least in this period of time, which is we're doing it through high quality research, education, and community programs. So I'm going to differentiate our mission, our purpose for being, from our vision. And I'm going to go to the trouble to read this aloud. And I think the vision as this picture that is achievable but it's aspirational, and it's something we'd all be excited to work on. And we might get it done in 2 5-year strategic plans. It's not a 100-year thing, but it's something that's going to take a real investment of time and effort and skill to get done. And so our vision is that by engaging community stakeholders and a vast number of health systems in a learning health network for cerebral palsy, we will collectively focus the research and the care of people with CP on the health issues that are most pressing to their participation and quality of life. We will gather and share lived experiences of the community members and measure aspects of the healthcare process to continuously improve their health and well-being in ways that matter to them. So that is the vision of the CP Research Network. So we then went on to discuss some of the things that we're doing, like in our objective of our 4 objectives of our strategy. A big portion is sustaining our work, i.e., how do we generate enough revenue from enough different sources? And one of the big changes we made last year is we moved to asking our hospitals to participate and contribute a fee. So each hospital pays $15,000 to participate in the network. And that was core to making a more diversified revenue stream and not just depending on philanthropy or just depending on grant support or sponsorships from industry. And so this shows you where we are from our original 30-center network that was all philanthropically funded. You know, a lot of sites have paid, a number of sites have identified the funds, and they're just doing the final sort of paperwork. And then there are some more sites that are seeking support. And then we've got a lot of sites that are prospects, like Shriners intends to join with all 22 of their hospitals in the coming years. It's going to take a while. But there are a number of, in fact, I just had Penn State Health System just contacted me. And just so you know, we do not recruit any sites. Sites come to us because they want to participate based on what they're hearing the network is about. So another goal in sustaining our work is growing our governance and creating programming to ensure that we have involvement from a broad set of stakeholders. And so that's not only the clinicians that treat, the insurers, the industry, but the community, and how is the community involved? And so we actually had a breakout that was focused on co-production, which is a bit of a buzzword, but it means not just researchers conducting research, but community members working side by side. And so we want to expand our co-production, and we brought representatives from our Community Action Committee. And so these 2 photographs are shots from this session that produced a pretty long list of things that we can do to do better, and we will tackle those over the coming year. We also are trying to, in our second objective, is really focused on growing our research. And as I said, the registry is a really core part of accelerating research. And so the first goal under objective 2 was to establish 25 registry sites that are implementing our data collection and sending that data to our data center. And so you can see that we're at 17 that are implementing the registry and transferring. The color coding is about how they're entering the data. It's about whether or not they're using Epic or Cerner or a tool called REDCap. We've got 5 more that are collecting but not yet transferring, and then a lot of sites that are still in the onboarding process. So feel good that by 2025, we will get to establish 25 registry sites that have implemented the forms and 15 more that are onboarding. Another part of objective 2 of fostering and conducting high quality multi-center research and QI is developing studies that will go out and get publicly funded so that we can execute them and answer questions. And so this was just a list of all of the work that we've got going on in the network in terms of things that are collecting preliminary data, or and this is just the things that were going on in discussion at the meeting. There's more than this, but these were going on. So either in a pilot data collection phase or just looking for preliminary data, things that are in the early stages of planning, like comparing drugs that are given for dystonia, looking at nutrition and growth, and then things that are already publicly funded that we discussed, and then things that have been submitted for public funding. These were all the topics, and Kristie's going to give a little more detail on this. So in short, I believe we are achieving this vision. We are really facilitating research and quality improvement through usual care. And we do that by collecting data into the electronic medical record. So the clinicians that are giving the care are providing the data as just part of their care. And that allows us to link the types of things that you express in our adult study, our patient-reported outcomes, that's what PROs are, to this clinically validated data that's collected as part of the hospital visit for someone coming to an annual appointment or getting a surgery. And that registry allows us to generate hypotheses and look at recruitment planning for studies, to look at practice variation, and it provides this platform for continuous improvement, which really allows us to do something that's critical in CP, which is to study long-term outcomes. One of the things that happen with research CP is the emphasis that all this intervention gets done with kids when they're young, but kids grow up to be adults, and what are the ramifications of all of that? And we're building that all into this platform of a learning health network. So that's kind of like the introduction. This is a moment in the meeting when Steve Wisnowski was answering a question, and you see a portion of the crowd sitting there in this great space that we had provided by Nemours. And so with that, I would like to turn it over to Kristie Bjornson. Dr. Bjornson is our scientific director, as well as being a site investigator for CPRN at Seattle Children's, and as well a professor in developmental medicine at the University of Washington and Seattle Children's Research Institute. She really has responsibility for directing our efforts to fund study questions. And she's recently been helped craft and is in charge of our Accelerator Awards, this mechanism that we developed in partnership with the CP Alliance Research Foundation, CPARF, to be able to give awards within CPRN to accelerate our studies. So with that, I will stop sharing my screen and turn it over to Kristie. You're still muted, Kristie.
Okay, let's see if we can get technology to work here. There's Paul.
I can hear you, so that's good.
Okay.
And I can see your screen, but not in slideshow mode.
Hang on a second.
That sounds like that must be your dog back there.
Yes, that is my dog. Hang on just a second.
That's okay.
Okay. I'm having trouble getting it into slideshow mode. So
it's just, yeah, there you go.
Okay, great. Hi, good evening and afternoon. I guess it's evening for everybody else except us out on the West Coast. It's in the afternoon. Thank you so much, Paul, for that introduction. The 2023 annual meeting was incredibly dynamic, and as I'm very excited, this has been starting my second year as a scientific director. My goal is to really support all the providers and the community members who are engaging with us in this process of trying to give better care for persons across the lifespan with cerebral palsy. And my goal today is to talk a little bit about the shots on goal. And the shots on goal has been sort of our mantra about wanting to put in more applications, more submissions, and get more work funded and done. So we're going to have just a really brief overview today of where we are with the different registries. And then also I'm going to talk a little bit about where we are with various studies and QI projects we're doing, our state of the science. And then I'm going to kind of drill down into what some of the breakout sessions were at the annual meeting as well. This all relates back to our objective of wanting to translate knowledge broadly with educational tools that will engage the extended community. Our goal then, of course, is to increase the percentage of patients that will benefit from evidence-based treatment. And the long term, we want to just improve the quality of clinical care. That's a big vision. And as you heard Paul talk about it earlier, we have lots of activity going on to address this goal and long-term vision. So at the moment, we're approximately 30 plus learning health centers across the United States and Canada. And our registry as of September of 22, and I apologize that I don't have more up-to-date numbers, but we are still transitioning to our new data coordinating center, which is at the University of Pittsburgh. We had 7,160 participants in our registry. That's awesome. The most of those were between the ages of 6 and 18, but we also had participants up older than 36 years of age, because we have a number of centers that care for adults. And then we also have children as young as 0 to 2 years of age. For the community registry, our snapshot, we had, as of August of 22, we had 1,499. And from this slide, you can see that they are predominantly in GMFCS level 2, but we have participants across the GMFCS functional levels as well. So we're definitely growing. We have both of these registries that can help us answer and support many different kinds of clinical questions, QI, as well as research. Now, for those of you who haven't seen this study pipeline graphic before, it has emerged and grown over the years that CPRN has been around. Just to remind you, on the left-hand side of the slide, people and participants and community members, as well as providers and researchers, come to CPRN with an idea of a concept that then gets reviewed. Hopefully it then moves on to an application for external and or internal funding. Once it's funded, then on the bottom you see we move into study implementation and study execution. And once the study has, of course, been IRB approved up here, eventually when it's done, we hopefully write a manuscript and we move into publications. So as you can see, our pipeline is really full. We want to make it even busier than it is in this slide. As you can see over here in the concept review or concept phase, we have a dystonia video library that's currently a work in progress, work around nutrition and rare diseases. All the way to the middle where you see these green circles represent the current quality improvement projects that we have going on about transition of care. We have one about dystonia, documentation of dystonia in the clinical record. We have a QI effort being led by Wade Schrader and a number of other orthopedic surgeons looking at hip surveillance, particularly in the non-ambulatory children with cerebral palsy. We have a QI going on about adult-centered care, as well as intrathecal baclofen pump QI. And then you move over to some of our publications that we're very excited and proud. That was alluded to a little bit. We have had papers about defining the cerebral palsy registry, our hip surveillance, community attitudes towards the diagnosis of cerebral palsy, and of course, Research CP, which was a group effort that was supported by PCORI and the NIH a number of years ago in Chicago. So let's talk a little bit about what happened in those individual breakout sessions. You heard a little bit from Paul about what we did as a larger group, but a number of people put in abstracts and applied to have working breakout sessions. So I'd like to go through some of those and give you just a little tip of the iceberg about what happened in those breakout sessions, so you can get a flavor of the depth and breadth of the kind of work that is going on in CPRN, and it's very exciting. One of the first ones I want to talk about today is a biorepository. And what this means is we want a way of organizing and storing information. And this information that we're talking about is at the level of DNA, MRI, so that would be like brain or spinal cord scans, hip and spine x-rays, as well as videos that physical therapists take of motor function, like use of your hand and or walking. Another breakout session we had was around supporting all the providers and the researchers and the community in research training so that we can be active and productive in our grant writing. So some of the discussion in that breakout session was around partnering with existing trainings that already exist to support people to write grants and to be good researchers. And one of them is called NIH Tiger. That is a training that actually a version of it I took early on in my career, and bring people together for kind of a retreat of writing, and you're mentored. It's a fabulous experience. And then really the goal about this breakout session was to try to support the providers at the sites who have great clinical questions that they are really learning about from what is important from the community and the children and the adults that they're caring for. We want to help them to gain research skills so that they can be writing more grants and getting more answers to the questions. We also had a breakout session about nutrition and growth in cerebral palsy. There is currently looking at to develop a study that will validate CP weight percentile as a marker of nutrition, and we hope to expand that across all the sites in CPRN. We also have, this is very exciting, and this is supported across a number of organizations that work with persons with CP. It's an international preventative healthcare guidelines for adults. And this is particularly of excitement because we are cooperating and collaborating with CPF with this. Currently, there is a survey phase that they are working in development that they're going to send out and hopefully recruit across all the various supporting organizations that you heard about from Paul earlier. And then the goal is to move that out into actually implementation. So the idea is that we're talking about preventative health care in childhood so that some of the challenges that adults with cerebral palsy are telling us about, we can address early on in life. And then there's the focal study, FOCAL. This is actually going to be a comparative effectiveness of selective dorsal rhizotomy project that will be submitted to NINDS, which is a institute at the National Institute of Health. And we hope to be submitting it here shortly in the next month. We discussed a lot about using different outcomes of change relative to expected change with the GMFM in our breakout group. And also we talked about grantsmanship, and we got some feedback from former NINDS project officers, as well as Ralph Nitkin, who was participating from NICHD. So that was very exciting and a great dynamic discussion. We also had another breakout group that talked about grip strength as a surrogate of health issues. They're working on their next steps are to actively engage the community and providers. And there's also a Colorado Children's local project that is working on the grip strength project work with Ed Hurwitz as well. We also had a breakout about the adult registry recruitment of cerebral palsy. This group submitted hope to submit an accelerator award and also to actively engage by co-production with the community members who participate in CPRN. The cerebral palsy checklist or the CP child and the health classification system for CP was also a breakout session, and it discussed the CP child, which is a parent-reported outcome measure for non-ambulatory children with cerebral palsy. They submitted a funding letter of interest, LOI, that was submitted by Uni Narayan, and that is for a validation study, and they are awaiting feedback to see if they can submit a full grant. So that was exciting. Uni and that group also talked about something called a health classification system for cerebral palsy. And there was a lot of discussion around the table about whether this was needed or not. And this is talking about all the other comorbidities persons with cerebral palsy may have as well, related to orthopedic issues, seizure issues, diabetes and adulthood, et cetera, those types of things. And so there was a lot of discussion that is still in the discussion phase. We also had a developing a dystonia treatment trial, and the current working discussion around this is that they hope to do a randomized trial of the medications that are already in use. So it would be a comparative effectiveness research. So that's basically taking what's already happening right now in clinical care and collecting all that information. And then on the back end, once we've collected all that information, because the sample sizes are so big, we can learn from what's working and what's not working. They're also working on how to quantify dystonia using video, and then coding that video. So there would be select items of things that we would position a person with CP in a certain position, and we would ask them to move, or we would give them certain stimuli in hopes of eliciting symptoms of dystonia, and using that as a way of saying, yes, dystonia is present, and then also possibly grading the degree of dystonia. And then, as Paul talked about, we had a breakout session about co-production, which was attended by some of the people who are also going to be sharing later tonight, Nina and Jocelyn. And we were really wanting to talk about how we can just build on our mission of engaging the community at all levels of our programming. And this is my last slide of the breakouts. We had a breakout about the clinical decision-making around surgical care for ambulatory children with CP. And this is taking a look at orthopedic surgery, intrathecal baclofen, and selective dorsal rhizotomy. The working group are currently working on public health data that is collected at a number of specialty care hospitals in the United States. It's called PHIS data, or PHIS data. We're working on literally pulling the data and analyzing it now by all the codes that we use for children who receive orthopedic surgery, intrathecal baclofen, and selective dorsal rhizotomy. We're going to use that to describe the variation and how those interventions are used. And then the next steps is we're going to replicate it across the Cerebral Palsy Research Network sites. We're also looking at a cerebral palsy imaging database. That's work on storing and scoring images of the brain and the spinal cord, and then also taking a look at how we actually can score and classify those images, of whether it's a grade 1 bleed, a grade 2 bleed, et cetera, and which part of the brain it is, and then how we relate that to the clinical presentation of the person with cerebral palsy. And then we have the genetics and cerebral palsy study, which I'm ending my slides with. We're very excited that we've more than met our enrollment goal. We've enrolled over 575 families. We do have a bit of a bottleneck at the moment that we have a workaround, and it's in process at the moment. The bottleneck is about accessing the clinical or the phenotypical information. In other words, how a person walks, how they move, what movement disorders they have. And we're having trouble getting that information back to families, but we've got a workaround, and that will be coming out soon. So we're very excited. That was the enrollment for that particular study was definitely supported by the Cerebral Palsy Research Network. And lastly, this is a lot of big syllables, big words, multidimensional endophenotyping, endophenotyping. And the idea is that we group patients by using a combination of their genetic makeup or as well as their clinical makeup. And so we take a look at their genetic lab measures that we've collected, and then we will match them and be able to classify people by their genetic makeup combined with their how they look relative to gross motor function classification, manual abilities classification, communication function, etc. So I'm very, very excited. It was a very productive time, and Cerebral Palsy Research Network is ready to move on. So thank you much, Paul, and I'm looking forward to the discussion. Thanks. Can't hear you, Paul.
Thanks, Kristie. I just did the biggest cheat that one can do. I did not have a headshot of one of our panelists, but she's here. I snapshotted her her photo quickly. I'm so sorry, Gina, but that's the best I could do. So I'm really excited to have Jocelyn Cohen, Gina Rolle, and Nina Miller here. What we're going to do, you see a little bio about them relative to their community interests and a little bit about what they do professionally. But I'm going to walk through in sort of a panel-like format and ask them questions and then turn it over to all of you to ask questions. So let me start with, I'm just going to ask you each to just sort of say what your relationship is, even though it was to a degree on there, but maybe add a little more information of interest about your connection to CP, and if you're if you're in a dual role with something with CP or have been in a dual role, please share that as well. So Jocelyn, I'll start with you.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Jocelyn Cohen, Vice President of Communications and Engagement at Cerebral Palsy Alliance Research Foundation. A very long title, very long organization. I have been at CPAR for over 4 years. I have spastic diplegia CP. Before this, I did not work in the CP space, but I did and still do lecture to PT students about adulthood and CP because they often learn about CP as a pediatric condition, and I don't want them running into an adult like me and having that be the first time they encounter an adult with CP. I think I've talked to well over 500 students at this point, so that's something I like to do on the side that's also related to my work.
Great, thanks. Gina Rolle.
I am Gina Rolle. I was in a dual role for the CPRN meeting. My mom to a 9-year-old daughter, Bria. She's has right hemiplegia. She's born at 23 weeks. And then professionally, I'm a clinical research coordinator at Cincinnati Children's.
And you do stuff for CPRN in that role, which I appreciate.
Oh, yes. that is what connects me here.
That's
sure.
okay. I'm happy about that. Nina Miller.
Hi, everyone. I am also here in multiple roles and points of inspiration for CP. I have a daughter, Josephine, who's 11 years old, athetoid CP. She's a GMF CS5. She speaks with eye gaze technology, with the most advanced technology on the market today. She's mainstreamed at school and thriving in many ways, academically and socially. So she's quite an inspiration. So I've worked in technology for 23 years, but when my daughter was born, that experience that I gained as a caregiver, as an advocate, it motivated me to take a sabbatical from the tech industry and pursue a career, helping to advance research. My dad's a scientist, so as soon as my daughter was born, he was very much science focused and helping me, connect into a network and educate myself with regard to what was happening globally. So, once I got access to that, I just wanted to get as plugged in as I could, particularly tackling the rigor of getting a child into clinical trials that have really, truly had a profound impact on her quality of life. Knowing the challenge that requires, the intensity, the skill sets, I really wanted to make research more accessible to the entire community. So I went and worked for Cerebral Palsy Alliance Research Foundation, where Jocelyn is as a partnership manager as well as a grant writer. And I'm back at Microsoft now, but very, very happily and gratefully working as a community action member for CPRN and helping Paul and Michelle write different, excerpts for the important work that they're doing. So I'm, again, very grateful to be here. Thank you.
And we really appreciate your volunteerism. So while we've got you up on screen, why don't you answer the first question what was your overall experience of the meeting, and was it what you were expecting?
So I attended for just over a day, and my overall experience was just incredible inspiration. The presence of powerful action, progress, passion, commitment, it recharged my battery. As a caregiver, it's, you get drained and sometimes discouraged. And being in the presence of both community members and researchers that have truly committed their life's work to helping solve very challenging problems for our community, our very, very worthy cause, it just re-energized me and provided immense hope. I really appreciated the challenging conversations that were taking place. The researchers talking about their pursuits, what's important to them, what they're seeing across their patient populations and their respective disciplines, and the collaboration and feedback and input that they received from their colleagues across the space. just demonstrated how collaborative this community can be, and just really gives me a sense of genuine progress. So yeah, I think just the collaboration and passion was most prominent for me.
Great, thanks. Gina, I'll have you answer the same question. What was your overall experience, and was it what you were expecting?
Right. So I'll be completely transparent. This is a new space for me professionally and personally. I did not know that this network even existed, honestly. And so I didn't know what to expect. Paul only told me to not be shy. But I didn't know what to expect. So it was really just a learning experience being around, you know, a room full of, you know, scientists, doctors, neurosurgeons, pediatricians, just all of these people collectively in the same room. I have not been in a room like that where everyone is talking about and brainstorming these ideas and their studies related to CP outside of the CP clinic. So this was a new experience for me. It's interesting seeing how CP brings people together, kind of from all different backgrounds. So overall, it was a good experience, but like I said, it was just new. It was a true eye-opening to even just other resources that are available. Just open my eyes to like knowledge that I wasn't privy to, different things that are being worked on. Interesting. It was, I guess, one thing. It was interesting seeing how important they were trying to bring the community, involve the community members into the research. So that was one thing that stuck out for me.
Great, thank you. So Jocelyn, can you say what your overall experience was and if it was what you were expecting?
I didn't have a specific expectation, but I really was glad that I got to go. I hadn't been to an in-person conference since 2019, so that's one thing. I'm glad I checked that off my list with this group. And one thing that stood out to me is that in the icebreaker, the last thing I said was if anyone wanted to collaborate, I meant with each other, not me, because I'm not a scientist, on either like reversing aging in muscle or preventing it, like you'd be my hero. And Rob came up to me and had this whole conversation with me for like 20 minutes right after that about the different mechanisms, the different ways you'd have to study it. And then I was awake in the middle of the night for no reason and had another thought and went to him, and he's like, you're way more of a scientist than you think you are, because I'm a word person. So that was really interesting and empowering and got me to think about that in a different way. One other thing over the last few years being at CPARP, I've always known that I'm an expert in the way that MyCP affects me, and I know that it affects everybody differently. And so I've learned so much in the last 4.5 years about the different kinds of CP, and I'm constantly learning like a sponge about it. So it was really great to be in these conversations about these different things. Like I was in Ed's conversation about the grip study. I have spastic diplegia, my hands aren't affected. I was really fascinated to hear all that's going on with that. And so I try to learn as much as I can, just for my own education, but also then to help the community in the role that I have at CPARP.
Great. Well, I'm going to go on to the next question while I'm with you, and I'm going to keep going back and forth like
Okay.
this. So first of all, when you mentioned Rob, was that Rob Aiken, the PhD?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's just interesting to know. Do you feel like investigators heard you and valued your input while you were in the meeting?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I was in the co-production meeting. I was in the adult care guidelines meeting. I was in the adult recruitment, the GRIP study, and I feel like one more that I'm just missing in my brain. But basically anything that had to do with adults, I was in those conversations. And I definitely felt valued in being there, and appreciate the openness that researchers and clinicians have around this, because I don't think that that's something that exists in every community. I don't know, but I can't imagine that that exists in every community. So I really do appreciate it.
That's great. Gina, how about you? Did you feel like you were heard?
Yes, I guess like Jocelyn, some of the rooms I was in, the co-production room, the focal room, and the CP checklist room, I did feel like I was heard when I had something to say. Like I said, mostly what I had to say were asking questions. I was a little hesitant at first, just because, like I said, it's a new space that I was in, talking with, asking questions to a neurosurgeon or a scientist even. I don't know that I would have been taken as serious, or if my question would have really been heard and answered if just coming from like a patient space. I've definitely had both experiences that way. So that was definitely new for me, since I do work with like the CP child survey. So going into the CP checklist, I had questions for, Dr. Uni, and he graciously listened and, answered them. So I really appreciated that. Yeah.
And I will say, I walked into a session you were in, and I know I asked you not to be shy, and I heard you ask the question like, yeah, but what does this mean to me as a parent? And I thought that was such a great question. And I think it forced them to really think about like, this is not just research for like scientific kudos. It's like, what's it mean to me? What's it mean to the family? And so hats off to you for asking that question. Nina, how about you? Did you feel like you were heard, or that your input was valued?
Absolutely. Many examples of that, but I'll share just one. I attended the nutrition session, and my daughter is tube fed. It's a very complicated process of ensuring that she's getting the right nutrients. We're concerned with bone density. We're concerned with skin health. There's so much, and everything comes down to, many of those things come down to nutrition. In my day-to-day experience, you're meeting with a nutritionist maybe 3 times a year, and it feels very templatized or formulaic. They're doing their very best to serve, our community, but with the shortages across healthcare, I've just found the intensity and tailoring of a nutrition plan to be greatly diluted over the last few years. So it was inspiring and exciting to be a part of that conversation, to learn about, what's happening in the space from a research perspective, and to also share what we go through day to day. I'm plugged into a lot of CP parent groups through social media. And what I find is that there's so much crowdsourcing going on because of the experiences that, folks that are dealing with similar situations have had. And those are incredibly valuable insights and often highly effective. But because we're in it every day, we don't realize like how impactful and important some of the discoveries we're making through trial and error can be to the scientific community. And so I was able to share, some of the insights that I have from questions that have come through the community, things that people are trying that, the researchers in the room didn't even know about. And they said, well, wow, I'm going to look into that. So it was a very interactive dialogue, and one where I felt there was a major contribution made from a community's perspective, and it just further enhanced my desire to bring in more community members, because we're doing, again, so much. We're intensely in the care day to day, and to be in a conversation that's specific and that's being driven by a researcher, it brings up, it sort of teases out some of those things that we're doing that can truly have an impact across the community. So I appreciated that. I appreciated the, the truly collaborative dialogue that took place. And I've even had follow-up conversations since then.
Well, and one of the things I'll say that was really exciting about that session and that I really love about the network is the network has grown new disciplines. Like we brought in an epileptologist a couple of years ago and expanded the research of this very common comorbidity. But you had a fellow, i.e. someone who's not yet an attending, or not yet, they're an attending, but not yet a specialist in gastroenterology, and then an attending, both from Nationwide there because they've decided to take on nutrition as an area of study. And it's a very exciting thing to see happen in the network. And I'm sure they really valued your input. I'm going to swing back to you, Jocelyn, and say, what would you want adults to know about this meeting and about the work of the CP Research Network?
I would want adults to know that it's happening. So much of the time we're told, oh, like you're kicked out of the nest at 18 or 21. So much of the research, like, as you know, when you look at a graph that depicts like where the research focus is, in the last, I think, 10 years, it's finally started to really go up for adults. And I just want other people to know this is happening, and there are people that care. Like, it's like, yes, of course, the actual findings of the research are important, and like you should talk to your doctors about whatever is discovered through the research, but just know you're cared about and not ignored, and that you're valued, and that, childhood with CP is really hard. Absolutely. Caregiving for a child with CP, I am sure, is incredibly hard. I have not had that experience, but for most of our lives, we are adults with CP. And so to know that there's this concerted effort by this group of folks to keep pushing that adult research forward and to keep looking at things from different angles, that's just as important as finding out the information that they're seeking and sharing that with the community too.
That's great. Thanks. Gina, let me ask it from the parent angle. What do you feel like you'd want other parents to know about this meeting or the work of the network?
I guess that it is important for more community members to be a part of the research. I guess that's one of the biggest takeaways from that, and just what the CPRN could offer to families. Most of these, all the flyers that you gave out, I mean, I had no idea this even existed. I used to think that CP was a smaller, just one smaller part of the disability community. I thought it was all about autism, and other disabilities. So I would say just that seeing how many people from all different backgrounds are invested in the research and are trying to contribute, that they do want to hear from the community members, that it won't just be seen as a complaint or, we just don't like the way something sounds, that maybe that if there was a group that would listen to parents and caregivers, and the adults, that, we could help make a difference and not just be a part of the research, in the, how do I say, the physical sense, we are literally the patient, but that our words and our experiences, everyone's experience and different skills that they've had to acquire are just as important, and maybe it could be heard if more community members were involved.
Yeah, great. Nina, I'll let you wrap this one up with, you've got the experience like Jocelyn of having been an insider in one of these organizations. What would you want other parents to know about this meeting or the work of the CP Research Network?
There's so much. I'll try to distill it down. One of the things that really inspired me was I had a discussion around recruitment of medical professionals into this space, because there's a very right? There's a subset of clinicians that have dedicated their careers to this, and that's very powerful, but you have to think about the next generation. And so there is an active effort in place by many of the folks in the network to educate the next generation, to inspire them, to demonstrate how interesting it is to study CP and how much there is that can be transformed with the right focus and the right intensity. And that effort, I've heard, has actually been very successful. So I want people to know that this is going to continue to grow and evolve. And also, I know, just for me personally, the adult space, to Jocelyn's point, I've been focused, my daughter being 11, on learning about early interventions and really focused on, front loading that as much as possible to change or to improve the outcome. And now that I'm in a, pretty serious transition with my daughter, she's growing, she's maturing. I'm really just starting to think about adult care models and understand where these, that it's a bit of a desert and there are many gaps. And, the importance of us putting energy into that as a community, and get more adults with CP involved so that these models can really be impactful and tailored, because there is a growing focus. It's just going to scale. And that's really encouraging.
Great, thanks. Let me open it up to the attendees. You can either put a question in the chat or ideally raise your hand, and I'll call on you, and it can really be anyone from across the spectrum. And if you don't raise your hand or put a question in the chat, I will go on asking my additional questions. But you've heard enough from me. Okay, there are no questions, and I'm really a little surprised. One thing I will put out, I'll start with Jocelyn. There's a dialogue going on. There was the co-production dialogue. What do you think? What would you like to see us do differently next year with the engagement of the community? Like, what do you think will look like we've made even more progress, even if you felt like this was good?
So, like I said, this was my first time going. I'm
a little bit giving you to speak on your feet.
So,
sorry.
Yeah. So there's I remember there were seven dimensions of it. There was a very big matrix, and there were a bunch of different dimensions of it, and we kind of got stuck on one of them. And that's how the conversation went. And so I wonder if, I understand there's a finite amount of time, but I wonder if maybe next time you pick one or two of the measures and we just focus on those one or two, so that we go deeper into those two things and don't do a disservice to the other 5 or 6.
So you're talking specifically about the dimensions of the learning health co-production and community engagement of that. Yeah, no, that's a great.
I can't remember which one we focused on because it's been less than a month, but 5 years in my brain apparently. But I just know it veered in a direction and that was fine, but everything else got a short shrift. So if there's a little bit more of a yes, we know there are these dimensions to it, or these just parts of it, but this year we're going to focus on 1, 2, and 3 things. And then that curtails potentially the discussion from going in from being pulled in one specific direction. And when you have 6 or 7 things to go through in an hour, everything's going to be a little bit more surface. So just knowing at the outset that it's going to be a deeper discussion would probably make it even better.
Great. Let me ask a question to everybody that's there. That's out there. If you were not invited to it, we have a limited number of people that we can bring in. We will try to grow that each year. Would people, you can either comment or clap or whatever, but would people want to listen in if we could run it as a Zoom and it was kind of a one way, because it's really hard to take remote interaction with a big in-person crowd? would people want to spend the time? It's day and a half, or maybe just for some of the breakouts. Do people think that would be an interesting thing to make time for in their day?
Paul, I really think that would be great. And I was just gonna say, listening to all this, I think this would be excellent to present at the adult SIG for the Academy. We're trying to recruit adults for a lot of these studies, and I just think that maybe some of them don't understand all the stuff that we're doing. And I think it'd be really important for them to see especially all the adult stuff that's going on, and the research that's being initiated, proposed. So I don't know, I think it would be a great session for the adult SIG for the Academy, because there's a lot of people that attend that.
Yeah, it is. It's very large. That's a very large attendance.
Yeah.
And just for those of you who don't know, this is, Dr. Debbie Thorpe, who is one of the creators of the adult study and has, part of the original efforts to get our adult research efforts off the ground. So,
I have to commend you all. This is amazing. And I wish I could have been at the meeting, but, and I hope UNC gets it together to get in the network. What you've done in the last, several years even is absolutely amazing how you've built this network. And I have to applaud you. It's amazing.
Well, thank you. And thanks for your, early and groundbreaking work on our study of adults. It's one of the things that's most appreciated, and I think even under communicated about how much that we're doing in this area. So let me say to Kristie and our panelists of community members, thanks for making the time to come to the meeting, to contribute to it. And thanks for sharing your experiences with the rest of the community. I greatly appreciate it. So thank you, everybody. Have a good night, and we'll post it tomorrow. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Paul. Thanks,
Yeah,
everyone.
Thanks, Paul.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.